A lot of sports, women's sports, have now banned trans women from competing, swimming, etc. But not so cricket. The International Cricket Authority still allow trans women, people who are biologically born male, to play in women's teams, like Danielle McGahey, who is set to play in the T20 international tournament for Canada. And, of course, this has angered women's sports fans, many of whom say, well, if we start letting biological males play in women's sports, that's the end of women's sports. But that's why quite a few sports have already banned trans women from competing against women, but not so cricket. So it's all to do with testosterone levels. They are satisfied that Danielle McGahey's testosterone levels are low enough to compete against women. But is this fair? Let's speak to the Director of Sport at Fair Play for Women, Fiona McAnena. Good morning, Fiona.
Good morning, Kevin.
Is this fair that Danielle McGahey will be able to play against biological women in cricket?
It's pretty obvious that it's not fair, isn't it? I mean, everybody knows that the reason we separate men and women in cricket and boys and girls is because male bodies have an advantage. So it's pretty blatantly unfair. And any talk about testosterone levels is completely irrelevant, because the difference between men and women is not their testosterone levels. It's one of the differences, but there are many, many others.
Well, you and your campaigners have had some success in this area, not in cricket, but talk us through the other sports that you have persuaded or helped to persuade that trans women cannot compete against biological women.
Yeah, I mean, it's really simple. That it's not to do with their identity. It's not to do with being trans. It's simply that the sports that have organised for a protected category for females need to maintain that. So now we see the biggest sports in the world, athletics, swimming, cycling, have restored that fairness for women. Some others in the UK, rowing, triathlon, badminton and volleyball. There are lots more that are reviewing. But around the rest of the world, and as we see here in North America, it's a really different state of affairs. And here in the UK, the England and Wales Cricket Board is not interested, it seems, in changing. Their position is that if a male person says he's a woman, then as far as they're concerned, he's a woman. And now you have to wonder if the England team, women's cricket team, is going to face male players at the T20. Is the ECB going to start looking for males, picking males, to represent England in their women's team? Because otherwise it's not fair.
Yeah, I mean, it just isn't. So why, you talked about all those big sports that have already changed their minds about allowing trans women to compete against women, because at one point everybody seemed to be doing it, but they've seen the unfairness inherent in this system, and they've changed. So why has cricket dug its heels in? As you say, this may be something to do with North America, where attitudes are slightly different, but also our cricket authorities here in Britain seem to be completely blasé about it. Why are the cricket authorities not looking at what swimming, what athletics, what cycling has done, and thinking we need to look at this as well?
I wish I knew the answer to that question, Kevin, because it's pretty obvious that, especially when you see the big sports change, that what's going to happen is that trans women are going to make their way into the sports that still let them play as women. So they're going to have an even bigger problem now. A lot of these governing bodies, like the ECB, say that they want to increase female participation because generally teenage girls tend to drop out of sport through their high school years much more than boys do. Well, they're not going to increase female participation if those teenage girls are now having to not only share the cricket field with boys, but share the changing rooms as well. So, we just hope that they will come to their senses before more girls in particular, and women, face this kind of unfairness and drop out of sport.
Just before you go, Fiona, explain, because as I say, the cricket authorities talk in terms of Danielle's testosterone levels being acceptably low. But explain why, in your view, no matter what your testosterone levels are, no matter what treatment you receive, you will always have an advantage if you were born male. Explain that.
Yeah. Well, testosterone in the male body is what drives all the changes, and that starts in the womb. Then there's a mini puberty in the first few months of life, and then there's the big one that we all know about in the early teenage years. But once that's happened, it's not the ongoing level of testosterone that maintains the height, the bulk, the muscle mass, you know, the bigger lung capacity of a man. That's done, and it can't be undone. You know, the testosterone, if you like, testosterone is like, it's like you boil the egg, but once the egg is boiled, you can't unboil it. So, you know, Danielle there is not going to shrink because of reducing their level of testosterone, and that's why you can't undo it. It's not fair.
Okay, listen, good to talk to you, Fiona. Thank you very much for your time. That's Fiona McAnena, Director of Sport at Fair Play for Women.